They told her she'd die in those chains, that no one would come, that refusing an alpha's claim was a death sentence for an omega with nothing left to lose. But Kaylin Thorne wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of living as someone's possession. So while the entire wolf realm celebrated upstairs, while alphas chose their mates and the alpha king himself walked among them, she sat alone in the dark with silver burning into her skin. She didn't know that one breath of her scent would change everything, that the most dangerous wolf alive was already on his way to find her. If you want to see how a girl with nothing becomes the one thing a king can't live without, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Now let's begin. The music from the grand hall was muffled but persistent, a distant pulse of celebration that made the silence in the stables feel even heavier. Kaylin shifted against the rough wooden post, her wrists screaming in protest. The silver shackles had been locked tight for hours now, and the burns were deep enough that she could smell her own flesh cooking beneath the metal. She refused to cry. Not because she was strong, though she'd spent her entire life pretending to be, but because she knew that if she started, she wouldn't stop. And there were still people in the estate above who would enjoy hearing her break. The stable was cold. Late autumn had come hard this year, and the wind slipped through cracks in the walls, carrying with it the scent of roasted meat, spiced wine, and the thick musk of too many wolves packed into one space. The mating ball. The event every unmated wolf in the territories had been preparing for since midsummer. Everyone except Kaylin. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe through the pain. The silver wasn't just burning her, it was poisoning her, slowly leaching into her bloodstream and making her dizzy. She could feel her wolf retreating deep inside her mind, whimpering and small. Silver did that. It didn't just hurt. It severed the connection between human and beast, leaving you feeling half alive. Footsteps sounded from somewhere above. Heavy boots on polished floors. Laughter. A woman's voice, high and musical, followed by a man's rumbling reply. Kaylin's stomach twisted. She wondered if her sister was up there. If Mira had managed to get inside the ball after all, wearing the dress Kaylin had saved months to buy her. Mira deserved to be there. She was beautiful, sweet-tempered, and had a wolf strong enough to catch an alpha's attention. Not like Kaylin. Kaylin was an omega, the lowest rank in the pack hierarchy. Weak wolf, unremarkable looks, no family name worth anything. The only reason she'd even been invited to the estate tonight was because Alpha Darius Valen had demanded it, and that demand had led directly to the chains. She could still see his face when she'd refused him, the way his expression had shifted from charm to confusion to cold, venomous rage. No one refused Darius Valen. He was handsome, wealthy, powerful, second only to the Alpha King himself in influence. When he'd cornered her 3 nights ago in the market square and proposed a private arrangement, half the town had looked at her like she'd won the lottery. They didn't know what she knew. They hadn't seen what she'd seen. Kaylin's hands trembled as the memory surfaced. 2 weeks ago, she'd been cleaning the upper floors of the Valen estate, one of a dozen menial jobs she worked to keep her family afloat, when she'd heard crying. Soft, desperate sobbing coming from behind a locked door at the end of the hall. She should have walked away. But the voice had sounded so broken, so afraid, that Kaylin had pressed her ear to the wood and listened. "Please," the voice had whispered, "please let me out. I'll do anything. I just want to go home." Kaylin had frozen. She'd asked around later, carefully, and learned the truth that no one wanted to say out loud. Darius Valen's previous mates had a habit of disappearing. 3 of them over the last decade. The official story was always the same. They'd left of their own accord, rejected the bond, run off with someone else. But servants whispered differently. They whispered about basements that were always locked, about omegas who went into his private wing and never came out, about a man whose smile was perfect and whose cruelty was invisible until it was too late. So when Darius had proposed to her in front of half the market, when he'd offered to clear her family's debts in exchange for her hand, Kaylin had done the unthinkable. She'd said no. She'd said it loudly, clearly, in front of witnesses. And Darius Valen did not forgive public humiliation. The chains were his revenge, a message, a reminder that omegas like her didn't get to choose. That refusal had consequences. He'd had her dragged to the stables just before sunset, right as the first guests began arriving for the ball. He'd stood over her while his men locked the silver around her wrists, his expression calm and pleasant. "You'll stay here tonight," he'd said softly, adjusting his cufflinks, "and think about what you've done. If you're very, very lucky, I might still be willing to accept an apology tomorrow. If not, well," he'd smiled, "your family's debts are considerable. I'm sure your sister would make a suitable replacement." Then he'd left her there. That had been hours ago. Kaylin's head lolled forward, exhaustion and silver sickness dragging her down. She didn't know what time it was anymore. Didn't know if anyone was even looking for her. Mira probably thought she'd stayed home, too proud to attend. Her mother was too sick to notice much these days. No one was coming. The thought should have terrified her, but instead it just made her tired. She let her eyes drift shut. That's when she felt it. A presence. Not close. Not yet. But moving. Purposeful. Powerful. Kaylin's wolf stirred for the first time in hours, lifting her head in confusion. The sensation was strange, alien, like a storm building on a clear day, like the moment before lightning struck. Her eyes snapped open. The stable door was still closed. The courtyard beyond was empty. But the feeling grew stronger with every passing second, a pressure building in her chest that had nothing to do with pain or fear. Then she smelled him. Pine and smoke and winter rain, clean and wild and utterly overwhelming. Her wolf lunged forward in her mind, suddenly frantic, clawing toward the surface despite the silver. Kaylin gasped, her body going rigid. This wasn't possible. She was chained, poisoned, dying. But her wolf didn't care, because the scent growing stronger in the air wasn't just any alpha. It was him. The stable door slammed open. Kaylin's head jerked up, her vision swimming. For a moment she thought she was hallucinating, that the silver had finally poisoned her mind along with her body, because the man standing in the doorway was Alaric Stormbane, the Alpha King. He was taller than she'd imagined, broader. His dark hair was pulled back from a face that could have been carved from granite, all hard edges and sharp lines, with eyes like molten gold that seemed to glow in the dim light. He wore black, head to toe, and moved with the kind of lethal grace that made even other alphas step aside. Kaylin had never seen him in person before. No one like her ever did. He was a legend, a myth, the wolf who'd unified the territories through sheer force of will and enough bloodshed to drown a city. And he was staring directly at her. For 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. Then his eyes dropped to the chains, and his expression changed. The temperature in the stable seemed to plummet. The air itself grew heavy, pressing down like a physical weight. Kaylin's wolf whimpered and submission crawled even as some wild, reckless part of her human mind whispered mine. Who did this? His voice was low, rough, and absolutely devoid of anything resembling mercy. Kaylin couldn't answer. Her throat had closed, her tongue useless. She could only stare as the Alpha King crossed the space between them in 3 long strides and dropped to one knee in front of her. Up close, he was devastating. She could see the faint scars along his jaw, the brutal strength in his hands, the way his wolf pressed just beneath his skin, barely contained. He reached for the chains. "Don't!" Kaylin's voice cracked. "Silver. I know." His hands closed around the shackles anyway. The smell of burning flesh filled the air immediately. Alaric didn't flinch. He simply wrenched the chains apart with raw strength, the silver links snapping like thread. Then he pulled the broken cuffs from her wrists and threw them across the stable hard enough to embed them in the wooden wall. Kaylin gasped as the pressure released, her hands falling limply into her lap. The burns were terrible, deep, blistering, still smoking faintly. Alaric caught her wrist gently, his touch impossibly careful despite the violence she'd just witnessed. He turned her hands over, examining the damage, and something dangerous flickered through his expression. "Who," he repeated, "did this to you?" She should have been afraid. Every instinct screamed that this man was a predator, that his attention was the most dangerous thing in the world. But her wolf was singing, and the bond between them was undeniable. "Alpha Darius Valen," Kaylin whispered. She felt the change in him instantly, the way his whole body went still, predator still. The kind of stillness that came right before an attack. "Why?" "I refused him." The words came easier now, riding a wave of exhaustion and shock. "He proposed. I said no. He said this was to teach me my place." Alaric's eyes lifted to hers. Up close, they weren't just gold, they were layered, amber and bronze and something molten that seemed to burn from within. "Your place," he said quietly, "is not in chains." Then he stood, pulling her up with him in one smooth motion. Kaylin's legs nearly buckled. She'd been kneeling for so long her muscles had locked, but his arm came around her waist, steadying her. The contact sent electricity racing through her entire body. Her wolf howled in recognition. "Mate. Mate. Mate. Can you walk?" he asked. Kaylin nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good." His hand settled more firmly against her back. "Because you're coming with me." "Where?" She felt his smile more than saw it. Sharp and cold and absolutely merciless. "To the ball." The walk from the stable to the Great Hall should have taken 2 minutes. It took closer to 10 because Alaric refused to let her stumble, and Kaylin's body was still shaking off the effects of the silver. He didn't speak during the walk, just kept one hand steady on her back, his presence a solid wall of heat and strength beside her. Kaylin was dimly aware of servants freezing in doorways as they passed, of whispered conversations cutting off mid-sentence, of shocked faces pressed to windows. The Alpha King didn't attend balls. Everyone knew that. He sent representatives, accepted reports, but never came in person. Until tonight. Kaylin's heart hammered against her ribs as they approached the main doors. She could hear the music clearly now, a waltz, elegant and sweeping. Could hear the murmur of hundreds of voices, the clink of crystal, the rustle of expensive fabric. "I can't go in there," she whispered. "Look at me." She was filthy. Her dress, a simple gray thing she'd borrowed, was torn and stained. Her hair had fallen out of its pins hours ago. Her wrists were still bleeding sluggishly from the silver burns. She looked like exactly what she was, a nobody Omega who'd been left to rot in a stable. Alaric stopped, turned to face her fully. "Look at me," he commanded, and the alpha authority in his voice made her eyes snap up automatically. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" Kaylin shook her head. "I see a woman strong enough to refuse a predator even when it cost her everything." His hand lifted, tilting her chin up. "I see someone who chose pain over surrender. I see my mate." The word hung between them like a thunderclap. Mate. He'd said it, acknowledged what they both felt. The bond that had snapped into place the moment their eyes met. "I don't..." Kaylin's voice broke. "I'm not..." "You're mine. Simple. Absolute. And no one touches what's mine." Then he pushed open the doors. The grand hall was exactly as beautiful as Kaylin had imagined. Chandeliers dripped crystal light across a floor so polished it looked like black glass. Hundreds of wolves in their finest clothes turned and swayed to the music, their jewelry catching the light, their laughter bright and careless. And every single one of them stopped when Alaric Stormbane walked in with his hand on a bleeding Omega's back. The music cut off mid-note. Conversations died. In the space of 5 seconds, the entire ballroom fell into shocked, suffocating silence. Kaylin felt their stares like physical blows, felt the weight of their judgment, their confusion, their disgust. She wanted to run, wanted to disappear, wanted to be anywhere but here. But Alaric's hand was steady on her spine, and he was moving forward with absolute confidence, cutting a path straight through the crowd. People scattered out of his way. Alphas who outranked entire territories stepped aside without a word. Kaylin caught glimpses of familiar faces in the crowd. Neighbors, former employers, people who'd looked through her 1,000 times before, and now they were all staring. Then she saw him. Darius Valen stood near the center of the room, a crystal glass in one hand, surrounded by admirers. He was handsome in his formal blacks, his dark hair perfectly styled, his smile charming and warm as he laughed at something a young beta woman had said. He looked up as they approached, and his smile froze. Alaric stopped directly in front of him. The circle of sycophants melted away instantly, sensing danger. For a long moment, the two alphas simply stared at each other. Kaylin could feel the power radiating off both of them. Darius's practiced, controlled dominance, and Alaric's raw, absolute authority. There was no comparison. Darius's wolf was strong. Alaric's was a force of nature. "Your Majesty." Darius recovered quickly, offering a respectful nod. What an unexpected honor. I didn't realize you were attending tonight. Neither did I, Alaric's voice carried across the silent ballroom, until I found something that belonged to me chained in your stable. Kaelin felt every eye in the room swing toward her. Felt the weight of hundreds of wolves suddenly noticing her injuries, her torn dress, the silver burns still smoking faintly on her wrists. Darius's expression flickered, just for a second. Then the charm snapped back into place. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, Your Majesty. The Omega in question was being disciplined for refusing you. Alaric's interruption was quiet, deadly. For having the audacity to say no when you proposed. The crowd murmured, shocked whispers rippled outward. Darius's jaw tightened. With respect, Your Majesty, Omega discipline is a pack matter. I have every right to. You have no rights where she's concerned. Alaric's hand moved from Kaelin's back to her shoulder, a clear claiming gesture that made her wolf sing and her knees go weak. Because she's mine, my mate, and you put silver on her. The murmurs exploded into chaos. Kaelin heard gasps, exclamations, someone's glass shattering on the floor. The Alpha King's mate. The king who'd never shown interest in bonding, who'd rejected countless offers, who was supposed to be unmateable. And he'd just claimed her. Darius had gone pale. She could see his mind racing, trying to find a way out, trying to calculate how to spin this. Your Majesty, I had no idea. If I'd known she was your intended, I never would have. She wasn't my intended when you chained her. Alaric's voice dropped to something that made grown alphas flinch. She was just an Omega. Someone you thought was powerless. Someone you could hurt without consequence. I was simply enforcing pack discipline. You were enforcing cruelty. Alaric took one step forward, just one, but it made Darius stumble backward. And now you're going to undo it. Darius's eyes darted around the room, looking for support, for allies. But every wolf present was either staring in shock or actively avoiding his gaze. I don't understand what Your Majesty wants. Her family's debts. Alaric's tone was conversational now, almost pleasant, which somehow made it more terrifying. You offered to clear them in exchange for her hand. Consider them cleared. I'll expect the paperwork delivered to the castle by tomorrow evening. Your Majesty, those debts are considerable. Then you shouldn't have used them as leverage. Alaric tilted his head slightly. Unless you'd prefer to bring the matter before the council. I'm sure they'd be very interested to hear about your methods of courtship. It wasn't a question. It was a threat wrapped in silk. Kaelin watched Darius's face cycle through rage, humiliation, and finally cold calculation. He was cornered, and he knew it. Challenging the Alpha King in front of hundreds of witnesses would be suicide. Of course, Your Majesty. The words came out clipped, tight. The debts will be cleared. My apologies for the misunderstanding. Your apology, Alaric said softly, is not offered to me. Every eye in the room swung toward Kaelin. She felt her heart stop. Felt the weight of expectation crushing down on her. An alpha like Darius Valen didn't apologize to Omegas. It didn't happen. It would humiliate him beyond repair. But Alaric was waiting, and so was everyone else. Darius turned toward her slowly. His eyes were flat, dead, but his voice was perfectly controlled when he spoke. My apologies, Miss Thorne. I overstepped. It wasn't sincere. Kaelin could hear the hatred beneath every word. But it was public, witnessed, undeniable. She managed a tiny nod, not trusting her voice. Alaric's hand squeezed her shoulder gently. Approval. Then he turned, addressing the entire ballroom with the casual authority of someone who'd never questioned whether he'd be obeyed. The lady is under my protection. Anyone who harms her answers to me personally. His gaze swept across the crowd, pausing on specific faces. Alphas who'd looked at Kaelin with disgust. Wolves who'd laughed behind their hands. Is that understood? A chorus of yes, Your Majesty, echoed through the hall. Alaric nodded once. Then he looked down at Kaelin, and his expression softened into something that made her chest ache. Come, he said quietly. Let's get those burns treated. He led her toward the exit. The crowd parted like water, no one daring to block their path. Kaelin glanced back once. Darius was still standing where they'd left him, surrounded by empty space, his perfect mask finally cracking to show the fury beneath. Their eyes met, and Kaelin saw her death in his gaze. She turned away quickly, her heart racing. Alaric's hand tightened on her shoulder as if sensing her fear. "He can't touch you now," he murmured, too low for anyone else to hear. "I promise you that." Kaelin wanted to believe him, but she'd seen what men like Darius did when their pride was wounded, and she had a terrible feeling this wasn't over, not even close. Set. The castle was nothing like the Valen estate. Where Darius's home was all polished marble and calculated luxury, Alaric's stronghold was raw stone and ancient wood, built into the mountainside like something that had grown there rather than been constructed. Kaelin barely registered any of it. Her mind was still reeling from what had just happened, from the bond humming between her and the man walking beside her, from the look in Darius's eyes. Alaric led her through torch-lit corridors to a private chamber where a healer was already waiting. The woman, an older beta with kind eyes, didn't ask questions, just immediately set to work cleaning and treating the silver burns. It hurt worse than the initial injury. Kaelin bit her lip hard enough to taste blood, trying not to cry out as the healer applied something that felt like liquid fire. "Almost done," the woman murmured. "You're very brave." Kaelin almost laughed. She didn't feel brave. She felt terrified and overwhelmed and completely out of her depth. When the healer finally finished bandaging her wrists and left the room, Kaelin found herself alone with Alaric for the first time since the stable. He'd been standing by the window, staring out at the mountain range beyond. Now he turned, and the weight of his full attention made her breath catch. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I'm dreaming." The words slipped out before she could stop them. "Or dead?" "Maybe both." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You're alive. I promise." Kaelin looked down at her bandaged wrists. "What happens now?" "Now you rest, heal, and we talk." "About what?" "About the fact that you're my mate." He said it so calmly, like it was simple. "About what that means. About what you want." Kaelin's laugh was sharp, borderline hysterical. "What I want? I'm an Omega. I don't get to want things. You do with me." The certainty in his voice made her chest tight. She looked up, meeting those impossible golden eyes. "You don't know me," she whispered. "You don't know anything about me. I know you chose silver over surrender." He moved closer, each step deliberate. "I know you protected your family even when it cost you everything. I know you're stronger than anyone who's ever underestimated you. You know what you saw in one moment, one night. Then show me more." He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. "Show me who you are. Take your time. But know this." His hand lifted, fingers brushing against her cheek with devastating gentleness. "You're mine now, and I protect what's mine." The bond between them pulsed, warm and insistent. Kaelin's wolf was practically purring, drunk on his presence, but her human mind was screaming warnings. This was too fast, too much, too dangerous. "What if I say no?" she asked quietly. "What if I don't want this?" She expected anger, disappointment, maybe even the kind of cold rage she'd seen directed at Darius. Instead, Alaric just nodded. "Then I'll respect that. The bond doesn't make you mine. It makes us possible. But possible isn't the same as inevitable." He stepped back, giving her space. "You have a choice, Kaelin Thorne. You've always had a choice. Anyone who tried to take that from you was wrong." The tears burned behind her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "I need time," she managed. "Take it. I need—" Her voice cracked. "I need to know I'm safe. That my family is safe." "They are. The debts are cleared. I'll have guards posted at your mother's house tonight." He paused. "And you'll stay here, in the castle, where I can keep you safe." "As what? Your prisoner?" "As my guest." His expression was unreadable. "Until you decide what you want to be." Kaelin stared at him, trying to find the trap, the angle, the moment where the mask would slip and she'd see the monster underneath. But all she saw was patience, and something that looked almost like hope. "1 month," she heard herself say. "Give me 1 month. To know you. To decide." Done. And during that month we're equals. No commands, no expectations. Just, she struggled for the word, just people. For the first time since she'd met him, Alaric smiled, really smiled, and it transformed his entire face, turning him from terrifying to devastating. Just people, he agreed. I can do that. He offered his hand. Kaelin hesitated for only a second before taking it. The moment their skin touched, the bond flared bright and certain between them, and somewhere deep in her chest, Kaelin felt something click into place. She didn't know if this was a beginning or a mistake, but for the first time in her life, the choice was entirely hers, and that was worth more than anything. The first week in the castle felt like living inside a dream that might shatter at any moment. Kaelin woke each morning in a bed so soft she thought she was still asleep, in a room with windows that overlooked mountains she'd only ever seen from a distance. Servants brought her meals she couldn't pronounce, and healers checked her injuries twice daily with a gentleness that made her want to cry. But the whispers followed her everywhere. She heard them in the corridors when she passed, saw them in the eyes of every wolf who worked in the castle. The servants were polite, too polite, the kind of careful courtesy that meant they were terrified of saying the wrong thing. The guards ignored her completely, which was somehow worse. And the handful of nobles who'd taken up temporary residence in the castle for various political reasons looked at her like she was a stain on expensive fabric. The Alpha King's mate, an Omega from nowhere, a girl who'd been found in chains. They didn't say it to her face. They didn't have to. Kaelin tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the fact that her mother's debts were cleared, that Mira had sent a tearful letter saying they were safe, that the silver burns on her wrists were finally starting to heal. But ignoring the stares didn't make them hurt less. On the 8th morning, she woke to find a note slipped under her door. Heavy paper, expensive ink, no signature. Some wolves don't belong in castles. Go home before you get hurt. Kaelin's hands shook as she read it, then read it again. She should have shown it to Alaric, should have reported it immediately. Instead, she burned it in the fireplace and said nothing. She saw Alaric every day, but never for long. He was busy. Running a kingdom apparently involved endless meetings, disputes to settle, territories to manage. But he made time. Sometimes it was breakfast together in a small dining room that felt less formal than the Great Hall. Sometimes it was a walk through the castle gardens in the evening when the air turned cold and the stars came out. He kept his word. No commands, no expectations, just conversation. Tell me about your family, he'd said on the 3rd day, as they walked past beds of late-season roses. Kaelin had hesitated. Her family wasn't impressive, wasn't interesting, but he'd waited patiently and eventually she'd told him about her mother's illness, about Mira's dreams of becoming a teacher, about her father, who died in a mining accident when Kaelin was 12, and how the debts had started piling up after that. You've been taking care of them alone, he'd observed. Someone had to. You were a child. I was the oldest. She'd shrugged, uncomfortable with the sympathy in his voice. It's what you do. He'd looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then he'd changed the subject, asking about her favorite books, and the tension had eased. It was strange. Getting to know him. He was nothing like she'd expected. The rumors painted him as cold, brutal, a king who'd killed his way to the throne and ruled through fear. But the man who walked beside her in the gardens was different, thoughtful, careful with his words. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did talk, it was with a dry humor that caught her off guard. The council thinks I should take a formal queen, he'd mentioned casually on the 5th day. They've been suggesting candidates for years. Kaelin's stomach had twisted. Why haven't you? Because I don't make decisions based on politics. He'd glanced at her. And because I was waiting. For what? For you, apparently. The way he said it, simple, matter-of-fact, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, had made her chest tight. But the whispers in the castle were getting worse. On the 10th day, Kaelin overheard 2 nobles talking in an alcove off the main corridor. She'd been returning from the library, arms full of books, when their voices had stopped her cold. It's disgraceful, a woman was saying. An Omega. Can you imagine? The bloodline will be ruined. He's clearly not thinking straight, a male voice agreed. The mate bond does that sometimes. Makes you irrational. He'll come to his senses eventually. Let's hope it's before he actually bonds with her. Can you imagine the scandal? Kaelin had stood frozen, her face burning. Then she'd turned and walked the other way, taking the long route back to her room. That night, she'd skipped dinner. Alaric had appeared at her door an hour later. "You weren't at dinner," he'd said without preamble. "I wasn't hungry." He'd studied her face for a long moment. "What happened?" "Nothing." "Kaylin?" She'd looked away. "I heard some people talking. It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." "Why?" The word came out sharper than she'd intended. I'm nothing, Alaric. I'm an Omega with no family name, no education, no skills that matter. And everyone in this castle knows it. They think I'm ruining you just by being here." He'd been quiet for a moment. Then he'd stepped into her room, closing the door behind him. "Look at me." She'd forced herself to meet his eyes. "Do you know what the mate bond is?" he'd asked softly. "A connection between wolves, fate, or biology, or whatever you want to call it. It's a gift." His hand had lifted, fingers brushing against her jaw. "It doesn't care about rank or bloodlines or what some idiot nobles think matters. It finds the person whose soul fits yours. And mine," his thumb had traced along her cheekbone, "mine chose you. Not because you're an Omega or despite it, because you're you." Kaylin had felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. What if that's not enough? It's everything. She'd wanted to believe him, but believing meant hoping, and hope was dangerous. The second week brought new problems. A delegation arrived from the southern territories, 5 alphas and their entourages, all there to discuss border disputes and trade agreements. They were powerful wolves, the kind who expected deference and got it, and they made their opinions about Kaylin very clear. She'd been having breakfast with Alaric when they'd walked into the dining hall unannounced. The lead alpha, a man named Corbin Ashwood, with silver hair and cold blue eyes, had stopped dead when he saw her. "Your Majesty," he'd said slowly, "I wasn't aware you had company." "This is Kaylin Thorne," Alaric had replied calmly, "my mate." The silence that followed was suffocating. Corbin's gaze had raked over her with unconcealed disdain. "Your mate. I see." The other alphas had exchanged glances. One of them, younger, with a scar across his temple, had actually laughed. "Forgive me, Your Majesty, but is this a joke? You're the Alpha King. You could have any alpha female in the territories. Hell, you could have had my sister. Instead, you claim an Omega?" Kaylin had felt her face burn, felt the weight of their judgment like a physical blow. Alaric had set down his fork very carefully. When he spoke, his voice was soft, lethal. "My mate bond is not your concern, Matthias. If you have opinions about it, I suggest you keep them to yourself, unless you'd like to challenge me directly." Matthias had gone pale. "Of course not, Your Majesty. I only meant—" "I know what you meant." Alaric's eyes had swept across all of them. "Kaylin is under my protection. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. Is that clear?" A chorus of "Yes, Your Majesty" had followed, but their eyes had remained cold. Kaylin had excused herself immediately after breakfast, ignoring Alaric's concerned look. She'd retreated to the library, the one place in the castle where she felt safe, and tried to lose herself in a book about mountain herbs. She was still there an hour later when Mira found her. Her sister had been allowed to visit twice since Kaylin moved to the castle, and each time had been bittersweet. Mira was thriving now that the debts were gone, healthy, happy, full of stories about her studies. But she looked at Kaylin with worry. "The servants are talking," Mira said quietly, settling into the chair beside her. Kaylin sighed. "They're always talking." "No, I mean really talking. About you and the king. About whether the bond is real or if he's just—" She paused. "If he's just using you." "Using me for what?" Kaylin's laugh was bitter. "I have nothing he could possibly want. That's what I said, but they think—" Mira bit her lip. "They think maybe he's trying to prove a point, that he doesn't need traditional alliances, that he can do whatever he wants. Maybe they're right." Kaylin— "No, think about it." Kaylin closed her book with more force than necessary. "I'm nobody. I bring him nothing. No political connections, no powerful family, no strategic advantage. What if this is all just him making a statement? Then why does he look at you like that?" Kaylin paused. "Like what?" "Like you're the only person in the room." Mira's voice was soft. "Like he'd burn the world down if anyone hurt you." "That's just the bond." Is it? Mira reached over, taking her hand. I've seen bonded pairs, Kay. I've seen the way they look at each other. What I saw at breakfast this morning, that wasn't just biology, that was choice. Before Kaylin could respond, the library door burst open. A guard stood in the doorway, breathing hard. Miss Thorne, you need to come with me. Now. Kaylin's heart lurched. What happened? It's your mother. She's collapsed. The world tilted. Mira's hand tightened on hers. What? No, she was fine this morning. The healers are with her now, the guard continued. But she's asking for you. Kaylin was already moving, Mira right behind her. They ran through the castle corridors, down to the guest wing where their mother had been given rooms. Alaric's doing, ensuring she had proper medical care. The door to her mother's room was open. Healers clustered around the bed, their faces grave. And in the bed itself, her mother looked so small, so fragile. Her skin was gray, her breathing shallow and labored. Mama, Kaylin rushed to her side, taking her hand. Mama, I'm here. Her mother's eyes fluttered open. Kaylin, what happened? You were getting better. The illness. Her mother's voice was barely a whisper. It was always going to win, sweetheart. We knew that. No, Kaylin's voice cracked. No, you're going to be fine. The healers here are the best. I need to tell you something. Her mother's grip tightened with surprising strength. About your father. Mama, rest. Listen. Her mother's eyes found Mira, then returned to Kaylin. Your father didn't die in a mining accident. He was murdered. The room went silent. Kaylin stared. What? He found something. In the mines. Something valuable that certain wolves wanted kept secret. Her mother coughed and blood flecked her lips. They killed him for it. And they've been watching our family ever since, making sure we stayed poor, stayed quiet. Who? Mira's voice was shaking. Who killed him? Their mother's eyes found Kaylin's. Darius Valen's father. And when the father died, Darius took over. He's been managing it all. The debts, the accidents, everything. He wanted to make sure we'd never... Another coughing fit cut her off. The healers rushed forward, but Kaylin could see the truth in their eyes. There was nothing they could do. Mama, please. Tears were streaming down Kaylin's face now. Please don't leave us. You're stronger than you know. Her mother's hand lifted, touching her cheek. Both of you, promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't let them. Her eyes rolled back. Alarms started going off in Kaylin's mind. The wrong kind of stillness, the wrong kind of silence. The healers moved faster, but Kaylin already knew. Her mother took one more shallow breath, then nothing. No. Kaylin's voice broke. No, no, no. Mira was sobbing. The healers were checking for a pulse, shaking their heads. And Kaylin felt something inside her chest crack open. Her mother was gone. And Darius Valen had killed her father. The rage that filled her was unlike anything she'd ever felt. It wasn't hot. It was cold, crystalline, sharp enough to cut. She stood slowly, her mother's hand slipping from her grasp. Miss Thorne, one of the healers started. Kaylin walked past them without a word, past Mira's tear-stained face, out into the corridor. She needed to find Alaric. She needed to tell him the truth. And then she needed to watch Darius Valen burn. She found him in the war room, surrounded by maps and the Southern Territory delegation. They were in the middle of a heated discussion about border patrols when she walked in. Every head turned toward her. Alaric took one look at her face and dismissed everyone immediately. Out! The command was absolute. The alphas filed out without argument, though Corbin's expression was sour. The moment the door closed, Alaric was across the room. What happened? My mother's dead. The words came out flat. Empty. And Darius Valen killed my father. She watched his expression change, watched the predator rise to the surface. Tell me everything. So she did. Told him what her mother had said with her dying breath, about the mines, the murder, the years of systematic destruction designed to keep her family silent and broken. When she finished, Alaric was utterly still. There's more, he said quietly. Isn't there? Kaylin looked up at him. What do you mean? I've been investigating Darius since the night I found you, since I saw what he was capable of. He moved to his desk, pulling out a folder. One of his former servants came forward, a beta woman who'd worked in his household for years. He handed her the folder. Inside were statements, testimonies, and photographs that made Kalen's stomach turn. 3 women, all Omegas, all reported missing over the last decade. They're alive, Alaric said, barely. He kept them in cells beneath his estate, some for years. The things he did to them, Kalen's hands were shaking. Where are they now? Safe, in a facility where they can heal, but they're willing to testify, to tell the council exactly what he is. When? The council meets in 3 days. I was going to tell you tonight. I wanted to have everything ready first. Kalen closed the folder carefully. Her mind was racing, pieces clicking into place. He'll run, she said. When he hears the council's investigating, he'll disappear before they can arrest him. I've already dispatched guards to his estate. He won't. You don't know him like I do. Kalen looked up. He's been planning for this. Men like him always have an escape route. Then we'll find him. No. An idea was forming. Dangerous, reckless, but it might be the only way. I'll find him. Alaric's expression hardened. Absolutely not. He thinks I'm weak. Thinks I'm just the Omega who got lucky. Kalen's voice was steady, despite the fear coursing through her. If I reach out to him, tell him I want to apologize, that I made a mistake. No. Alaric's hand caught her arm. I won't use you as bait. You're not using me. I'm offering. Kalen, he murdered my father. Her voice cracked. He destroyed my family, and if he runs, he'll just do it to someone else, somewhere else. I'll hunt him to the ends of the earth if I have to. How many will he hurt while you're hunting? She pulled away from his grip. How many more women will disappear? How many more families will he destroy? I don't care. The words were harsh, raw. I care about keeping you safe. And I care about justice. Kalen's hands clenched into fists. This is my choice, Alaric. You promised me choices. She watched him struggle, watched the alpha in him war with the promise he'd made. Finally, he spoke. If we do this, and that's if, it's not just you. I'll have guards everywhere. The moment he tries anything, he won't get the chance. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Kalen stepped closer, meeting his eyes. Because you'll be there. Won't you? Something in his expression shifted, softened. I'll always be there, he said quietly. That's not the question. The question is whether you trust me enough to let me protect you. I trust you. The words surprised her with their truth. I just need you to trust me too. For a long moment, they stood there. The bond between them hummed, warm and steady. Then Alaric nodded once. Sharp, decisive. 3 days, he said. We set the trap. And when he comes for you, we end him. Kalen knew it was dangerous, knew that Darius was smart, cruel, and desperate. But her mother's last words echoed in her mind. You're stronger than you know. It was time to prove it. The message went out that same night, carried by a messenger Alaric trusted absolutely. Simple words on expensive paper, written in Kalen's careful script. I made a mistake. I need to speak with you. Alone. The old mill at midnight tomorrow. Please come. K. They had no way of knowing if Darius would take the bait. No guarantee he hadn't already fled. But Alaric's spies reported that he was still at his estate, conducting business as usual, his mask of civility perfectly intact. Either he didn't know the investigation was coming, or he was confident enough to believe he could weather it. Kalen spent the next day preparing. Not physically. Alaric's guards handled that, positioning themselves throughout the woods surrounding the abandoned mill, setting up sightlines and escape routes. No, Kalen's preparation was internal. She rehearsed what she'd say, how she'd act, practiced looking weak, defeated, apologetic. It felt like swallowing poison. Mira had tried to talk her out of it, had begged her not to go, tears streaming down her face as they'd stood in their mother's room, surrounded by the emptiness she'd left behind. You don't have to do this, Mira had whispered. Let the king handle it. Let someone else. No one else can. Kalen had held her sister close. He won't come for anyone else. It has to be me. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Kalen, you stay here. You stay safe. That's not negotiable. She'd pulled back, gripping Mira's shoulders. Promise me, whatever happens tonight, you stay in the castle. Mira had promised, though her eyes had been full of fear. Now, as the sun set and midnight approached, Kaylin stood in her room and stared at her reflection. She'd dressed simply. A plain dress, nothing that suggested wealth or status. Had left her hair loose, the way Darius had always said he preferred. The bandages were gone from her wrists now, leaving only faint scars where the silver had burned. A knock at the door made her turn. Alaric entered without waiting for permission. He was dressed for hunting, dark clothes that would blend with shadows, weapons she could see and probably a dozen she couldn't. His face was set in hard lines. "Last chance to change your mind," he said. "I'm not changing my mind." "He's dangerous, Kaylin. Even trapped, even surrounded. Cornered animals are the most vicious." "I know." She crossed to him, looking up into those golden eyes. "But I'm not helpless. Not anymore." His hand lifted, cupping her face with devastating gentleness. "I know you're not. That's not what scares me." "Then what does?" "Losing you." The words were raw, honest. "I just found you." The idea of something happening. Kaylin rose on her toes and kissed him. It was the first time she'd initiated contact between them. The first time she'd acted on the pull of the bond instead of fighting it. She felt him go still with surprise, then his arms came around her, pulling her close. The kiss was careful at first, tentative. Then it deepened, and Kaylin felt the world narrow to just this, his mouth on hers, his hands gentle on her back, the bond between them singing with rightness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alaric rested his forehead against hers. "Come back to me," he whispered. "I will." "Promise." "I promise." The old mill sat at the edge of the forest, a crumbling stone structure that hadn't been used in decades. The wheel was still there, rotting and motionless, and the stream that once powered it had dwindled to a trickle. It was the perfect location, isolated, forgotten, and close enough to the road that Darius could approach without suspicion. Kaylin arrived first, just after 11. Alaric's guards melted into the trees, invisible in the darkness. Alaric himself took position in the mill's upper floor, where broken windows gave him a clear view of the clearing below. Then she waited. The forest was alive with night sounds, owls hunting, small creatures rustling through underbrush, wind moving through bare branches. Kaylin's wolf was restless, pacing inside her mind, sensing danger. Midnight came and went. For 10 terrible minutes, Kaylin thought he wasn't coming, that he'd seen through the trap or simply didn't care enough to respond. Then she heard footsteps. Darius emerged from the tree line like a shadow made flesh. He was alone, dressed in dark colors, his handsome face unreadable in the moonlight. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, his eyes finding her immediately. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Darius smiled. "Hello, Kaylin." The sound of his voice made her skin crawl, but she forced herself to stand still, to look vulnerable. "You came," she said softly. "Of course I came. Your message was quite intriguing." He moved closer, each step deliberate. "Though I'll admit I'm surprised. Last time we spoke, you seemed rather set against me. I was scared. And now? Now I'm desperate." She let her voice crack slightly. "My mother just died. The king's interest in me is fading. The castle servants whisper that I'm just a novelty, a phase." Darius's smile widened. "I did warn you, Alpha Kings don't mate with Omegas, not permanently." "I know that now." Kaylin wrapped her arms around herself, the picture of defeat. "I made a mistake, refusing you. I thought if I just held out, something better would come along, but nothing did. And now I have nothing. You have debts cleared, a dead mother who can't accumulate more. That's something." The casual cruelty in his voice made her want to shift and tear his throat out. Instead, she looked down, letting her hair fall forward to hide her expression. "The debts are cleared for now," she said quietly. "But Mira still needs to eat, still needs a home. And She forced herself to look up at him. "I need protection." "From what?" "From what happens when the king loses interest completely." She took a shaky breath. "You were right about everything. I should have accepted your proposal, should have been grateful." Darius studied her for a long moment. In the darkness, his eyes reflected moonlight like a predator's. "This is quite the turnaround," he said slowly. "Forgive me if I'm skeptical." "I don't blame you." Kalen took a careful step toward him. "I was proud, stupid. I thought I deserved better than what you were offering, but I don't. I'm just an Omega, and you—" Another step. "You were willing to take care of my family, to give me status, to protect me. And yet you chose silver chains over my bed. I chose wrong." The words tasted like ash. "I see that now." Darius's head tilted slightly. "Do you?" "Yes." "Then prove it." Kalen's heart stuttered. "What?" "Prove you're sincere." He gestured around the clearing. "This feels very much like a trap, Kalen. The king's guards are probably watching us right now, so prove to me that you actually want my protection, and not just—" He moved faster than she expected, crossing the distance between them in a blur and grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. "To lure me into an ambush." Kalen gasped, her wolf snarling. Above them, she heard the faintest creak of floorboards. Alaric, moving into position. "You're hurting me," she managed. "Am I?" Darius's grip tightened. "Good. Because you hurt me, Kalen, publicly. Humiliated me in front of the entire territory. Did you think I'd forget that? Did you think I'd just—" A sound from the trees made him stop. His head whipped around, eyes scanning the darkness. "Who's there?" he called out. Silence. Then, from the opposite direction, a branch snapped. Darius's expression changed. The charm dropped away completely, leaving something cold and calculating beneath. "I knew it," he hissed. "You stupid little—" He yanked Kalen against him, one arm wrapping around her throat. She felt something sharp press against her ribs. A knife, she realized distantly. When had he drawn a knife? "Alaric Stormbane." Darius's voice rang out across the clearing. "I know you're here. Show yourself, or I'll open her throat." Kalen's pulse hammered. This wasn't the plan. He wasn't supposed to— A figure dropped from the mill's upper window, landing in a crouch that should have shattered bone. Alaric straightened slowly, his eyes locked on Darius. The killing intent radiating off the Alpha King was palpable. Kalen felt it like static electricity, raising every hair on her body. "Let her go," Alaric said quietly. "I don't think so." Darius's arm tightened fractionally. "In fact, I think we're all going to have a little talk. About property, about respect, about what happens when someone takes something that belongs to me. She never belonged to you. Details." The knife pressed harder against Kalen's side. She felt it pierce through fabric, the tip biting into skin. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to dismiss your guards, all of them. And then you're going to let me walk out of here with what's mine." "She's not—" "Yes, she is. Because I claimed her first. Before you. Before this whole mate bond farce." Darius's voice was rising now, losing its practiced smoothness. "I chose her. I offered her everything, and she threw it back in my face because she thought she could do better, thought she deserved a king." "She deserves more than both of us," Alaric said. His eyes flicked to Kalen's for just a second. "But she chose me, and I will burn this entire territory to ash before I let you touch her." Darius laughed. It was a terrible sound, high and brittle and completely unhinged. "You're bluffing. You can't afford to start a war over an Omega. The Council would never—" "The Council," Alaric interrupted, "has seen the evidence. They know about the women in your basement, about the murders, about your father's crimes and yours. There's nowhere for you to run, Valen. This ends tonight, one way or another." For a moment, Darius went absolutely still. Then Kalen felt him start to shake. Not with fear, with rage. "You don't understand," he said, his voice dropping to something raw and desperate. "None of you understand. They were mine. Mine to keep, mine to do with as I pleased. That's how it works. Omegas exist to serve, to submit, not to refuse, not to challenge, not to—" He was spiraling. Kalen could feel it in the way his grip kept shifting, the way his breathing had turned ragged. She made her decision in a heartbeat. Her wolf surged forward, giving her strength she shouldn't have had. She drove her elbow back into Darius's ribs with everything she had, simultaneously twisting away from the knife. She felt the blade slice across her side, hot and sharp. But she was already moving, already dropping and rolling away. Darius stumbled, surprised by her resistance, and Alaric was on him. The fight was brief and brutal. Darius was strong, well-trained, desperate. But Alaric was an alpha king, and his mate was bleeding. There was no contest. Alaric's hand closed around Darius's throat, lifting him off the ground like he weighed nothing. The knife clattered to the dirt. "You cut her," Alaric said softly. Each word was precisely enunciated, utterly calm. "You actually cut her." "She's just an Omega," Darius choked out. "She's mine." Alaric's other hand came up, claws extending. Kaelin saw his eyes flash gold, saw his wolf rising to the surface. "Alaric, wait," she started. He looked at her. His expression was terrible, all predator, no mercy. "He hurt you." "I know, but we need him alive, for the trial, for the other victims." She watched him struggle, watched the alpha in him war with the man who'd promised her choices. Finally, his claws retracted. He threw Darius to the ground hard enough to crack ribs. Guards emerged from the forest surrounding them. One of them moved to help Kaelin, but she waved him off, pressing her hand to the wound in her side. It wasn't deep. She'd gotten lucky. Darius lay on the ground, gasping for air. His perfect mask finally shattered. Blood ran from his nose. One arm was bent at an unnatural angle. "Chain him," Alaric ordered. "Silver, and don't be gentle about it." The guards moved to obey. Darius tried to resist, but he was broken now, physically and mentally. Whatever he'd been holding on to, whatever delusion of power had sustained him, it was gone. Alaric crossed to Kaelin, his hands gentle, as they pulled hers away to examine the wound. "How bad?" she asked. "Not as bad as it could have been." His jaw was tight. "You shouldn't have—" "I know, but it worked. You could have been killed." "But I wasn't." She caught his hand. "We got him. It's over." Except it wasn't, because at that moment, one of the guards called out, "Your Majesty, we have a problem." Alaric turned, still supporting Kaelin. "What problem?" The guard was holding something, papers, Kaelin realized, documents that must have fallen from Darius's coat during the fight. "These are transfer orders," the guard said slowly, "for assets being moved to— Your Majesty, these implicate members of the council and the southern delegation, and—" His face had gone pale. "Half the noble families in the territories." Silence fell across the clearing. Alaric took the papers, his expression darkening with each page he read. Finally, he looked up. "This isn't just about Valen," he said quietly. "This is a network, a conspiracy." Kaelin felt cold spread through her chest. "What kind of conspiracy?" "The trafficking kind. The kind where powerful wolves buy and sell Omegas like property." Alaric's hands were shaking now, rage barely contained. "The kind where Darius wasn't the monster. He was just one small piece of something much bigger." On the ground, Darius started to laugh. It was a horrible sound, wet and broken. "You thought you won," he gasped. "You thought catching me would fix everything, but I'm nothing. The operation I ran was nothing. There are dozens like me, hundreds, and they're not going to let you tear it all down, not without a fight." Alaric's eyes met Kaelin's. She saw the terrible truth reflected there. This wasn't over. It was just beginning, and now she'd put herself directly in the center of a war she'd never known existed. The ride back to the castle was tense and silent. Darius was secured in a reinforced carriage, guarded by wolves Alaric trusted absolutely. Kaelin rode with Alaric, her wound bandaged but still aching, her mind racing. "How many?" she asked finally. Alaric didn't pretend not to understand. "Based on these documents, at least 20 confirmed participants, maybe more." "Including the Southern Alphas, the ones who were at breakfast?" "3 of them, yes." Kaelin's stomach turned. "They're in your castle right now. Not for long." When they arrived, the castle was in chaos. Word had already spread. How, Kaelin didn't know, but the corridors were full of whispers, of servants and guards rushing to and fro. Alaric sent Kaelin to the healers with strict orders to have her wound properly treated. Then he went directly to the war room, where the southern delegation was waiting. Kaelin disobeyed. She followed him instead, staying in the shadows of the corridor outside the war room. The door was thick, but she could hear voices raised in anger. Accusations are absurd. That was Corbin Ashwood. We came here in good faith. You came here to monitor whether I was getting too close to the truth. Alaric's voice was cold. The documents recovered tonight prove your involvement in a trafficking operation that spans 3 territories. You have one chance to cooperate. Tell me everything. Names, locations, how the operation works, and maybe, I'll let you live. You have no authority. I am the Alpha King. I have all the authority I need. Silence. Then Matthias's voice, younger and more frightened than Corbin's. What if we give you information? What guarantee do we have? None. Alaric's response was immediate. You get nothing except the possibility of mercy, which is more than you gave the women you sold. More silence. Then Corbin spoke again, his voice shaking with rage. You're destroying everything our family's built, everything the territories stand for. All for what? An Omega? A girl you've known for 2 weeks? No. Alaric's voice was soft, deadly. I'm destroying a system that allowed monsters like you to thrive. The Omega you're so dismissive of is just the one who had the courage to expose it. Kalen's throat tightened. You're starting a war, Corbin said. The families involved won't stand for this. They'll let them come. The threat in Alaric's voice was unmistakable. I'll tear apart every family, every territory, every alpha who profited from this. And when I'm done, there will be a new order, one where power doesn't give you the right to destroy lives. Footsteps approached the door suddenly. Kalen barely had time to slip into a side corridor before the war room doors burst open. Guards emerged first, followed by 3 Southern Alphas in chains. Corbin's face was twisted with fury. Matthias looked terrified. The 3rd Alpha, a woman named Sarah, was eerily calm, her eyes calculating. They were marched away, and Kalen waited for Alaric to emerge. When he did, he looked exhausted, ancient, the weight of what he'd just learned pressing down on him. Then he saw her. You didn't go to the healers. No. Kalen, I heard what you said. She stepped out of the shadows. About starting a war. I meant it. I know. She crossed to him. But you're not doing it alone. His expression shifted. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. Her voice was firm. It became my fight the moment those men looked at me and saw property. The moment Darius put silver on my wrists. The moment my father was murdered to keep secrets that protected their operation. She lifted her chin. I'm not hiding while you tear down the system that tried to destroy me. I'm fighting beside you. Alaric stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he smiled. It was a terrible smile, all edges and promise of violence. Then we fight together. He pulled her into his arms, careful of her injury, and Kalen felt the bond between them solidify into something unbreakable. They stood there in the corridor, surrounded by the ruins of political alliances and the beginning of a war, and Kalen realized something crucial. She'd spent her whole life being told she was weak, powerless, nothing. But the men who'd tried to break her were in chains now, and she was standing beside a king who would burn the world down to protect her. The war room doors opened again, and a messenger rushed out, nearly colliding with them. Your Majesty! The young wolf was breathless. The council is demanding an emergency session, tomorrow at dawn. They're calling it a vote of no confidence. Alaric's expression didn't change. Let them vote. Your Majesty, if they succeed, if they remove you from power, they won't. The messenger swallowed hard. How can you be sure? Alaric looked down at Kalen, and his smile turned sharp. Because I have something they don't. Truth. Evidence. And a mate who's braver than every one of them combined. He turned back to the messenger. Tell the council I'll see them at dawn. And tell them to bring their lawyers. They're going to need them. The messenger fled. Kalen looked up at Alaric. What's the plan? We expose everything. Every name, every transaction, every crime. We drag it all into the light and watch them scramble. His hand cupped her face. But first you're going to the healers. No arguments. What about you? I have documents to review, evidence to organize, a case to build that's airtight enough to withstand anything they throw at us. How long do we have? 6 hours, maybe less. Kalen's heart was racing, but not with fear, with something else. something that felt like purpose. Then let's make them count. Alaric leaned down and kissed her, hard and claiming and full of promise. When they broke apart, Kaelin saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Love. Not just the bond, not just biology or fate or destiny, choice. He'd chosen her, was choosing her, every moment, every decision, every stand he took, and she was choosing him back. Together, she whispered. Together, he agreed. Then they separated. Alaric to the war room, Kaelin to the healers, both preparing for the battle that would come with dawn. In the dungeons below, Darius sat in his cell and smiled, because he knew something they didn't. The council wasn't just corrupt, it was owned, controlled by families who'd profited from the trafficking networks for generations. And when those families realized their entire operation was about to be exposed, they wouldn't just fight back. They'd eliminate anyone who threatened to talk, including the Omega girl who'd started it all. The healers' chambers were quiet, except for the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional clink of glass vials. Kaelin sat on the examination table while the beta woman, her name was Iris, she'd learned, cleaned and restitched the knife wound with practiced efficiency. "You're lucky," Iris murmured, threading the needle through skin. Another inch to the left, and he would have hit something vital. Kaelin didn't feel lucky. She felt like she'd stuck her hand into a wolf trap and barely pulled it back with all her fingers intact. "The Alpha King was here earlier," Iris continued, her voice carefully neutral. "Demanded to know the exact extent of your injuries. I've never seen him like that. So, protective. We're mates. I know. Everyone knows." Iris tied off the final stitch and reached for bandages. "But there's a difference between claiming someone and caring about them. What I saw in his eyes when he looked at you, that was caring." Kaelin's throat tightened. She didn't trust herself to respond, so she just nodded. Iris finished the bandaging in silence, then stepped back. "You should rest. The council meeting is in a few hours and you'll need your strength." "I'm going with him." The healer's eyebrows rose. "To the council chamber? Miss Thorne, that's where I need to be." Kaelin slid off the table, testing her range of motion. The wound pulled but held. "This started because of me. I'm seeing it through. The council won't like having an Omega present, especially not during a vote of no confidence." "I don't care what they like." Iris studied her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You know what? I believe you. Good luck, Miss Thorne. You're going to need it." Kaelin left the healer's chambers and made her way through the castle corridors. It was well past midnight now, but the place was alive with activity. Servants rushed past, carrying documents. Guards stood at attention at every corner, and she could hear raised voices coming from behind closed doors. The entire castle was preparing for war. She found Mira in her room, sitting by the window and staring out at the mountains. Her sister turned when Kaelin entered, and relief flooded her face. "Thank the stars," Mira breathed, rushing over. "When I heard about the fight, about Darius cutting you—" "I'm fine." Kaelin caught her hands. "A little bruised, but fine." "You're insane, you mean?" Mira's eyes were red from crying. "You could have been killed. What were you thinking, confronting him alone?" "I wasn't alone. Alaric was there. His guards were there. And he still managed to put a knife in you." Kaelin couldn't argue with that. Instead, she pulled Mira into a hug, holding tight. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry for scaring you, but Mira, we found something." Evidence of a trafficking network that spans the territories. Darius wasn't working alone. There are council members involved. Noble families. It's bigger than we ever imagined. Mira pulled back, her face pale. "What does that mean?" "It means tomorrow morning, when the council meets, Alaric is going to expose all of it. Every name, every crime, and they're going to fight back." "Then don't go." Mira's grip tightened. "Stay here. Stay safe. Let the king handle it." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I'm the reason he's doing this." Kaelin's voice cracked. "Because if I hide now, I'm saying that Omegas like me deserve to hide. That we should be grateful for whatever scraps of safety powerful wolves decide to give us. And I'm done with that, Mira. I'm done being small." Her sister stared at her, tears streaming down her face. Then slowly she nodded. "Okay," Mira whispered. "Okay. But promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." They held each other for a long moment. Then Mira stepped back, wiping her eyes. Go, she said. Go stand beside your king, and show them what happens when they underestimate you. Kalen found Alaric in the war room, surrounded by papers and maps. His jacket was discarded, his sleeves rolled up, and exhaustion lined his face. But when she entered, his eyes lit up. You should be resting, he said. So should you. His mouth quirked. Touché. Kalen crossed to the table, looking at the organized chaos spread across its surface. Documents with names highlighted, ledgers showing transactions, testimonies from the women they'd rescued, maps with locations marked in red. This is everything? She asked. Everything we have so far. It's enough to prove the network exists, enough to implicate at least 15 council members and twice as many noble families. He ran a hand through his hair. The question is whether it's enough to survive a vote of no confidence. How does the vote work? 2/3 majority to remove me from power. If they succeed, leadership passes to the council collectively until a new Alpha King can be chosen. And if they choose someone who's part of the conspiracy, then all of this was for nothing. Alaric's jaw tightened. They bury the evidence, discredit the witnesses, and continue operating like nothing happened. Kalen felt cold spread through her chest. We can't let that happen. No, we can't. He looked at her, his expression fierce. Which is why I need you to stay here tomorrow, in the castle, where it's safe. Absolutely not. Kalen, no. She moved around the table to face him directly. You don't get to protect me from this. Not when I'm the evidence they can't refute. What are you talking about? I'm living proof of what they do. She gestured to her bandaged wrists where the silver scars were still visible. I'm the Omega who refused an Alpha and got chained for it. I'm the daughter of the man they murdered to protect their secrets. I'm the mate you claimed in front of hundreds of witnesses. Her voice strengthened. I'm the story they can't rewrite. Alaric stared at her. You want to testify? Yes. Do you understand what that means? You'll be standing in front of wolves who see you as property, who profit from keeping Omegas powerless. They'll tear you apart. Let them try. Kalen's hands clenched into fists. I've been torn apart before. I survived. And this time, I'm not alone. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Alaric reached out, pulling her against him with desperate gentleness. You terrify me, he murmured against her hair. Your courage, your strength, the way you refuse to break. Good. Kalen tilted her head back to look at him. Because I need you terrified enough to let me fight. He laughed, short and sharp. Then he kissed her, deep and claiming and full of everything words couldn't express. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Alaric rested his forehead against hers. Together, he said. Together, she agreed. They worked through the rest of the night, organizing evidence and preparing testimony. Alaric walked her through council protocol, explained the hierarchy and politics at play. Kalen listened and learned, memorizing names and faces from the documents spread before them. As dawn approached, Alaric sent her to change into something appropriate for the council chamber. Kalen returned to her room to find a dress laid out on the bed. Not the simple gray thing she'd worn before, but something elegant, deep blue fabric that caught the light, cut to flatter without being ostentatious. A note rested beside it in Alaric's precise handwriting. You said you wanted to be seen. Let them see you. Kalen dressed carefully, braiding her hair back from her face. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back, not because of the dress, but because of the expression in her eyes. No more fear, no more apology, just determination. A knock at the door announced a guard. Miss Thorne? The Alpha King requests your presence in the council chamber. It was time. The council chamber was ancient stone and dark wood, built into the mountain itself. High windows let in the pale light of dawn, and torches burned in iron sconces along the walls. The chamber was circular, with tiered seating rising up on all sides and a central floor where the accused, or in this case, Alaric, would stand. Kalen entered behind Alaric, and the reaction was immediate. Conversation died. Heads turned. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes. felt their shock and outrage that an Omega had dared enter this sacred space. Let them stare. Alaric took his position in the center of the chamber, and Kalen stood slightly behind him. A deliberate choice, visible, but not presumptuous. The council members filed in. Kalen recognized some of them from the documents she'd studied. Lord Brennan, an older alpha with silver hair and cold eyes, who'd profited from the trafficking routes through the Eastern Territories. Lady Cassia, beautiful and cruel, who'd personally purchased 3 Omegas over the last decade. Marcus Thorne, no relation to Kalen, who'd covered up investigations in exchange for a cut of the profits. All of them looked at Alaric with barely concealed hostility, and all of them looked at Kalen like she was an insult to their very existence. The council head, an ancient alpha named Silas Blackwood, called the chamber to order with a sharp crack of his gavel. "We are gathered for an emergency session," Silas announced, his voice carrying across the stone chamber, "to address concerns regarding His Majesty's recent actions and determine whether he remains fit to lead." Alaric's expression was impassive. "I'm ready to answer any questions the council might have." "Then let us begin." Lord Brennan stood, his face flushed with anger. "Your Majesty, in the past week, you have arrested 3 visiting alphas from sovereign territories, imprisoned a respected member of the nobility without trial, and made accusations that threatened to destabilize the entire realm. All of this over the word of an Omega." His eyes flicked to Kalen with undisguised contempt. "Your mate." "The arrests were made based on evidence, not accusations," Alaric replied calmly. "Evidence I'm prepared to present to this council. Evidence obtained through questionable means, evidence obtained by investigating crimes that you, Lord Brennan, personally profited from." The chamber erupted into chaos. Voices rose in outrage, in denial, in demands for proof. Silas's gavel cracked again. "Order! There will be order!" When the noise subsided, Alaric continued. "If the council wishes to question my fitness to lead, I welcome that scrutiny. But in return, I demand the same scrutiny be applied to every member of this chamber." He gestured to the documents his guards had brought. "I have testimony from 12 Omega victims, financial records showing trafficking profits, correspondence between council members coordinating sales and transfers, names, dates, amounts." His voice hardened. "So yes, Lord Brennan. Let's discuss destabilization. Let's discuss the system you've built that treats living beings as commodities." "This is outrageous." Lady Cassia was on her feet now. "You cannot march in here and accuse half the council of what? Crimes you've committed?" Alaric's eyes were cold. "The evidence doesn't lie, Lady Cassia. Your personal ledgers show purchases of 7 Omegas over the last 15 years. Care to explain what happened to them?" "They were servants. They were prisoners. Some barely survived." Alaric's hand lifted, and a guard stepped forward with a folder. "Testimony from one of your servants details years of abuse, starvation, and torture. Shall I read it aloud?" Lady Cassia's face had gone white. Around the chamber, other council members were shifting uncomfortably, whispering to each other. "Your Majesty." Silas's voice cut through the tension. "These are serious allegations. If you have proof, present it formally. Let the council examine the evidence and determine its validity." Gladly, Alaric gestured to his guards, who began distributing copies of the documentation. While the council members reviewed the evidence, Kalen stood perfectly still. She could feel their eyes on her, assessing, dismissing, hating, could hear their whispered conversations. An Omega convinced him to do this. Mate bond madness. It happens. He'll regret this when the bond settles. She wanted to scream at them, wanted to shift and show them exactly what this Omega was capable of. Instead, she waited. Finally, Lord Brennan spoke again. His voice was controlled now, calculated. "Even if we accept this evidence as legitimate," he said slowly, "it changes nothing. The individuals involved can be dealt with separately. That doesn't justify your Majesty's methods. Arresting foreign alphas without due process, making threats against noble families, starting what amounts to a civil war over—" He paused deliberately. "Over Omega welfare." "Omega welfare, Banarkume," Alaric repeated quietly. "Say what you really mean, Brennan. Say that you don't believe Omegas matter, that their suffering is acceptable if it profits you." I'm saying that order matters. Tradition matters. The hierarchy exists for a reason. The hierarchy, Kaylin heard herself say, exists to protect predators. Every head in the chamber swung toward her. She'd spoken without thinking, the words bursting out before she could stop them. But now that they were out, she wasn't taking them back. Alaric's expression flickered, surprise, then something that might have been pride. Lord Brennan's face flushed with rage. The Omega speaks? In the council chamber? This Omega has a name, Kaylin said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. And this Omega has something to say. You have no right. She has every right, Alaric's voice cut across Brennan's. She's my mate. And more importantly, she's a witness to the crimes you're trying to dismiss. Silas was watching with calculating eyes. Let her speak, he said finally. I'm curious what story she's been told to tell. The insult was clear, the implication that she was just parroting Alaric's words. Kaylin took a breath and stepped forward, moving to stand beside Alaric in the center of the chamber. 3 weeks ago, she began, her voice carrying in the silent chamber, Alpha Darius Valen proposed to me. He offered to clear my family's debts in exchange for my hand. When I refused, he had me chained in his stable with silver and left there during the mating ball. She held up her wrists, showing the scars. These are the marks of your hierarchy, of the system Lord Brennan says exists for a reason. I was punished for saying no, for daring to think I had a choice. She lowered her hands. But I was lucky. I was found. Others weren't. Your personal grievances, Lady Cassia started. I'm not finished. Kaylin's voice sharpened. My father was murdered 12 years ago, not in a mining accident as we were told, but because he discovered something valuable that the Valen family wanted kept secret. My family was systematically destroyed. Debts, accidents, illness, all designed to keep us silent and desperate. Because desperate Omegas don't ask questions, they just submit. She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of council members around the chamber. You want to talk about order, about tradition? Your tradition killed my father. Your order chained me. Your hierarchy is built on the suffering of wolves you consider beneath you. Her voice rose. And you have the audacity to sit in judgment of a king who's trying to end it? The chamber was utterly silent. Then Lord Brennan spoke, his voice dripping with contempt. A touching story, but the word of one Omega against the entire council. She's not alone. The voice came from the chamber entrance. Every head turned. 3 women stood in the doorway. Kaylin recognized them from the photographs in Alaric's files, the survivors they'd rescued from Darius's estate. They were thin, scarred, terrified. But they were standing. The oldest of them, a woman with gray-streaked hair and haunted eyes, stepped forward. My name is Elena Frost, she said, her voice shaking but clear. And I was held prisoner by Darius Valen for 7 years. One by one, the other women introduced themselves, told abbreviated versions of their stories. The chamber grew quieter and quieter as they spoke, the horror of what they described impossible to dismiss. When they finished, Silas Blackwood's face was grim. This council, he said slowly, has always prided itself on justice, on order, on protecting the realm. He looked around the chamber. If these allegations are true, and the evidence suggests they are, then we have failed in that duty, spectacularly. Silas, Lord Brennan started. Silence. The command was absolute. I have served on this council for 40 years. I have watched empires rise and fall, and I will not watch this one collapse because we were too corrupt or too cowardly to face the truth. He turned to Alaric. Your Majesty, you have presented evidence of systematic trafficking, corruption, and murder involving council members and noble families. What do you propose we do about it? Alaric's expression was fierce. Full investigation. Every name in those documents, every transaction, every crime. Those found guilty face trial and punishment. No exceptions for rank or status. That will tear the realm apart, Marcus Thorne said quietly. The realm is already torn, Alaric replied. We're just finally seeing the wounds. Silas nodded slowly. Then he turned to the council. All those in favor of proceeding with His Majesty's investigation and shelving the vote of no confidence pending its results? Kaylin held her breath. Hands began to rise, slowly at first, then faster. Not all of them. Lord Brennan and Lady Cassia kept their hands down, their faces masks of fury. But enough. More than enough. Motion carries, Silas announced. The investigation proceeds, and those implicated will answer for their crimes. Lord Brennan stood abruptly. This is a mistake. You're giving power to an Omega-blinded fool who will destroy everything we've built. We built a system on slavery and murder, Silas interrupted. Perhaps it deserves to be destroyed. Brennan's face went purple. He opened his mouth to respond, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, he turned and stalked from the chamber, several other council members following in his wake. When the door slammed behind them, the remaining council members began talking among themselves. Not in anger now, but in grim acceptance. Alaric turned to Kaelin. You shouldn't have spoken. I know. That was dangerous, reckless. You made yourself a target. I know. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. It was also brilliant, brave. Everything I expected from you and more. Kaelin felt tears threatening and blinked them back. Did we win? We won this round. He looked toward the door where Brennan had exited. But the war is just beginning. One of the surviving Omegas, Elena, approached them hesitantly. Miss Thorne, she said softly, what you said in there? Thank you. For speaking when we couldn't. You spoke today, Kaelin replied. That's what matters. Only because you showed us it was possible. Elena's eyes were wet. For years I thought I deserved what happened, that I was weak for not escaping, for not fighting back. But watching you stand there and face them, her voice broke. You gave me hope. Kaelin pulled the woman into a hug, not caring about protocol or propriety. You survived, she whispered. That makes you stronger than any of them. The other survivors joined them, and for a moment they stood together, 4 Omegas who'd refused to stay silent. When they finally separated, Silas approached. Miss Thorne, he said formally, you've done this realm a service today. Speaking truth to power is never easy. It shouldn't be necessary, Kaelin replied. No, it shouldn't. He turned to Alaric. Your Majesty, you've made powerful enemies today. Brennan won't go quietly, neither will the families implicated in the evidence. I know. Good. Silas's expression was fierce. Because I'm too old to start a war, but I'm not too old to finish one. You have my support. Use it wisely. As the council chamber emptied, Alaric and Kaelin stood together in the center of the floor. What happens now? She asked. Now we arrest everyone named in the documents, freeze their assets, gather more evidence. He paused. And we prepare for them to fight back. How will they fight? Every way they can. Legal challenges, political maneuvering, and if that doesn't work, his jaw tightened. They'll try to eliminate the witnesses, the survivors, and you. Kaelin felt cold spread through her chest. Let them try. Alaric pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her. I won't let anyone hurt you, I promise. I know. She looked up at him. But Alaric, I need you to understand something. I'm not afraid anymore. Whatever they do, whatever they try, I'm not backing down. His eyes searched hers. Then he smiled, fierce and proud. I know. That's what I love about you. The word hung between them. Love. Not just the mate bond, not just destiny or biology. Love. Kaelin's breath caught. Alaric, I love you, he said again, quieter now. I don't know when it happened. Maybe in the stable when I found you in chains. Maybe when you demanded a month to know me. Maybe when you insisted on standing beside me despite every danger. His thumb traced her cheek. But it happened. And I need you to know it before whatever comes next. Kaelin felt tears spill over. Happy tears this time. I love you too, she whispered. And I choose you. Not because of fate, because of who you are. They kissed in the empty council chamber, surrounded by the echoes of the revolution they'd just started. When they finally broke apart and headed for the exit, Kaelin felt something settle in her chest. Not peace. There was too much work ahead for peace. But purpose. The girl who'd been chained in a stable was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd faced the council and won, and this was only the beginning. The attacks started 3 days after the council session. Not physical attacks. Not at first. Those would come later. No, these were subtler, more insidious. Rumors spread through the territories like wildfire. The Alpha King had gone mad over an Omega. The evidence was fabricated. The survivors were paid actors. Kaylin Thorne was a manipulator who'd seduced her way into power and was now destroying noble families to cover her own shameful origins. Kaylin heard the whispers everywhere she went, in the castle corridors, in the markets when she ventured out with her guard escort, even from servants who thought she couldn't hear them. "She's ruining everything," one maid hissed to another as Kaylin passed. "My cousin works for the Brennan family. They're going to lose everything because of her lies. I heard she threatened the king, said she'd reject the bond if he didn't do what she wanted. Omegas shouldn't have that kind of power. It's unnatural." Kaylin kept walking, her face carefully neutral. But each word was a small cut, death by 1,000 whispers. She found Mira in the library that afternoon, reading through law books with fierce concentration. "What are you doing?" Kaylin asked. Mira looked up, her eyes blazing with determination. "Learning. If they're going to change the laws, someone needs to understand what the current ones actually say. I want to help." Kaylin felt her throat tighten. "Mira, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." Mira stood, crossing to her sister. "You've been fighting alone for too long. Let me fight beside you now." They embraced, and Kaylin felt some of the weight on her shoulders lighten. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Alaric, she had the survivors, and she had her sister. Together, they could face anything. Alaric's response to the rumor campaign was swift and methodical. Within a week, he'd arrested 23 wolves based on the evidence they'd gathered. Nobles, merchants, even 2 lower-ranked council members. Their assets were frozen, their territories placed under temporary oversight, and the survivors' testimonies were recorded and sealed as official court documents. But for every arrest made, 3 more families closed ranks. Old alliances solidified. Money changed hands. And suddenly, witnesses who'd been willing to talk went silent, servants disappeared, and documents mysteriously caught fire. "They're destroying evidence," Alaric said grimly one evening, staring at reports of the 3rd warehouse fire in as many days. "Covering their tracks before we can build complete cases." Kaylin stood beside him, studying the maps on his desk. Red marks indicated destroyed evidence. Blue marks showed successful seizures. There was far too much red. "Can we stop them?" she asked. "Not all of them. Not fast enough." His fist clenched on the desk. "Some of these bastards are going to walk free because we can't prove what they did. But we saved the survivors. That has to count for something." "It does. It counts for everything." He looked up at her, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "But it's not justice, not complete justice." Kaylin moved around the desk, taking his hand. "Then we keep fighting, however long it takes." He pulled her into his lap, burying his face against her shoulder. For a moment, the Alpha King disappeared, leaving just a man exhausted by the weight he carried. "I'm tired," he admitted quietly. "I'm tired of fighting wolves who should be on my side. Tired of watching guilty predators slip away while their victims suffer. Tired of—" He stopped himself. "Tired of what?" Kaylin prompted gently. "Tired of worrying that I'm going to lose you." His arms tightened around her. "Every day you're in danger. Every night I wonder if this is the night they come for you. And I can't lose you, Kaylin. Not now. Not ever." She cupped his face, making him look at her. "You're not going to lose me. I'm stronger than they think." "I know you are. That's what terrifies me. You're strong enough to do something reckless, brave enough to put yourself in danger if you think it'll help." He wasn't wrong, but Kaylin just kissed him instead of confirming his fears. The real trouble started on the 8th day. Kaylin was visiting the survivors, now housed in a secure facility on the castle grounds. When Elena pulled her aside, her face pale with fear. "Something's wrong," Elena whispered. "2 of the guards who were here yesterday are gone, replaced with new ones I don't recognize." Kaylin's instincts went on alert immediately. "Did you ask about it?" "The new guard said it was just a rotation, but it wasn't scheduled, and there's something about them that feels off." Kaylin trusted Elena's instincts. The woman had survived 7 years in captivity by learning to read danger. "Stay here," Kaylin said. "Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in except me or the Alpha King." "Where are you going?" to find out who authorized the guard change. Kaylin hurried back toward the main castle, her mind racing. Guard rotations happened all the time. It could be nothing. But Elena's fear had been real, and in the current climate, paranoia was justified. She was halfway across the courtyard when someone grabbed her from behind. A hand clamped over her mouth before she could scream. An arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her off her feet. She caught a glimpse of the guard uniform, smelled the familiar scent of castle soap. But underneath it was something else. Something wrong. Kaylin's wolf surged forward, and she bit down hard on the hand covering her mouth. Tasted blood, heard a male curse. The grip loosened just enough for her to wrench free. She spun, already shifting partially, claws extending, teeth sharpening. The man facing her wore a guard's uniform, but his eyes were cold and professional. Not a guard. An assassin. He lunged. Kaylin dodged, using her smaller size to her advantage. Her claws raked across his arm, drawing blood. He hissed and pulled a knife. Silver, she realized with horror. The sight of silver sent a jolt of fear through her. Memories of the chains, the burning, the helplessness crashed over her. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She screamed then, loud and desperate. "Alaric!" The assassin's eyes widened. He'd clearly expected her to come quietly, to be an easy target. Instead, she was fighting, making noise, refusing to be silenced. He swung the blade. Kaylin threw herself backward, feeling it whistle past her throat. Her back hit the courtyard wall, and she had nowhere left to retreat. The assassin advanced, silver knife gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Nothing personal," he said coldly. "Just business. You should have stayed quiet." "I'm done being quiet," Kaylin snarled. She feinted left, then dove right as he lunged. The blade grazed her shoulder, burning through fabric and skin. Kaylin cried out but kept moving, scrambling away. Then guards, real ones, came pouring into the courtyard, weapons drawn. The assassin realized he was trapped. For a moment, Kaylin saw calculation flash across his face, weighing his options. Escape versus capture versus... He brought the silver knife to his own throat. "No," Kaylin started, realizing what he was about to do. "We need him alive." Too late. He cut deep and fast, blood spraying across the cobblestones. He was dead before he hit the ground, taking whatever information he had with him. Kaylin stood frozen, staring at the body, her hands shaking. Blood, his and hers, stained the courtyard. Her shoulder burned where the silver had cut her. Then Alaric was there, pulling her against him, turning her face away from the corpse. "Are you hurt?" His hands moved over her, checking for injuries. When he found the cut on her shoulder, his expression went murderous. "He cut you. He actually..." "I'm fine. It's not deep." Kaylin was shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting hard. "He didn't... I bit him and screamed and he dropped me. You did perfectly." Alaric's voice was shaking with barely controlled rage. "You fought back. You called for help. You survived." Guards surrounded them now, checking the body, securing the area. One of them looked up, his face grim. "Your Majesty, he's got a mark. Brennan family seal, tattooed on his inner wrist." Alaric's expression went deadly cold. "Find Lord Brennan, now, and double the guard on Miss Thorne and the survivors. No one gets in or out without my personal authorization." "There are more," Kaylin said, finding her voice despite the trembling. "Elena said 2 guards at the survivors' facility were replaced. We need to check if they're..." Alaric was already moving, barking orders. Within minutes, the facility was surrounded by loyal guards. They found the replaced guards unconscious in a storage room, drugged but alive. The 2 imposters were gone, fled when the alarm was raised in the courtyard. But they left something behind. A message carved into the wooden door of the facility. Omegas should know their place. Kaylin stared at the words, her shoulder still burning, and felt cold fury settle in her chest. "They're trying to scare us," she said quietly. "It's working," Elena whispered, standing beside her with the other survivors clustered close. "No." Kaylin turned to face them, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. "No, it's not. Because if we're scared, we're silent. And silence is what let them hurt us in the first place." "They tried to kill you," one of the other women said, her voice breaking. "In broad daylight, in the castle. If they can do that..." "They failed." Kaylin's voice was hard. "I'm still standing, still talking, still fighting, and so are all of you." But if they try again, let them. The words came out fierce. Every attempt they make proves we're right, proves they're desperate, proves they know they're losing. Elena stepped forward, her expression conflicted. You're very brave, Kaylin, but bravery doesn't stop silver knives. No, but it stops me from giving up. Kaylin looked at each of them in turn. They want us afraid, want us to recant our testimonies, hide away, disappear. If we do that, they win. All the pain, all the suffering, it was for nothing. And if we don't, another survivor asked, if we keep fighting and they kill us, then we die free, Kaylin said simply. Not as victims, not as property, as wolves who chose to stand up. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Elena nodded slowly. You're right. I've been a victim for 7 years. I'm not going back to that. Not ever. One by one, the other survivors nodded agreement. Alaric, who'd been watching from the doorway, stepped forward. I'm moving all of you into the castle itself. Protected quarters. Maximum security. No one gets to you without going through me first. Your Majesty, we can't ask you to... Elena started. You're not asking. I'm telling. His eyes swept across all of them. You've suffered enough. You've been brave enough. Now let me protect you while we finish this. The relief on their faces was palpable. That night, after the survivors were safely relocated to heavily guarded rooms in the castle's most secure wing, and Kaylin's shoulder had been treated and bandaged, she couldn't sleep. The healer had removed the silver residue and applied a poultice that eased the burning, but the memory remained. She kept seeing the assassin's cold eyes, the silver blade, the moment he'd chosen death over capture. She was sitting by the window in her room, staring out at the mountain range silhouetted against the starlit sky, when Alaric knocked and entered. I thought I'd find you here, he said softly. Couldn't sleep. He settled beside her on the window seat, pulling her carefully against his side, mindful of her injured shoulder. For a long moment, they just sat together in comfortable silence. I'm sending you away, he said finally. Kaylin went rigid. What? Just for a few weeks, until we've arrested everyone on the list, until the threat is neutralized. His arm tightened around her. I have a secure location in the Northern Territories, isolated, heavily guarded. You'd be safe there. No. Kaylin, no. She pulled away to face him. I'm not running. I'm not hiding. That's exactly what they want. I want you alive. I am alive, and I'm staying that way by fighting, not fleeing. Her hands clenched into fists. If I leave now, what message does that send? That Omegas should hide when threatened? That we should let powerful wolves dictate our lives through fear? I don't care about the message. I care about you. His voice cracked. I care about coming back to our room and finding you there. About hearing your voice. About knowing you're safe. If something happened to you, something almost happened today, and I survived. I fought, and I survived. Kaylin's voice softened. Alaric, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I can't run. Not from this. Why not? Why does it have to be you on the front lines? Because I'm not just your mate anymore. She gestured around the castle. I'm a symbol. Every Omega in the realm is watching to see what I do. If I hide, they learn that power still wins, that speaking up just makes you a target. But if I stay, if I fight, I prove that we can stand up to predators and survive. You could die proving that. Maybe. But I'll die standing, not kneeling. She caught his hands. And I won't die alone. You'll be there. Your guards will be there. We're stronger together than they are apart. He stared at her for a long moment, conflict warring in his expression. The alpha in him wanted to lock her away somewhere safe. The man who loved her knew she'd never forgive him for it. Finally, he closed his eyes and nodded. Then we do this together, he said quietly. No more trying to protect you by sending you away. No more half measures. We end this completely. How? A dangerous smile curved his lips as he opened his eyes. By forcing them out of the shadows, by making them come at us directly, where everyone can see what they really are. You want to use me as bait again? No, I want us to challenge them openly, force their hand. His eyes were fierce. The final arrests are scheduled for tomorrow at dawn. The big names, Brennan, Cassia, Marcus Thorne, and 3 other council members. When we take them, their allies will have to make a choice. Accept it or fight back. And you think they'll fight? I'm counting on it. He pulled her closer, careful of her shoulder. But this time we'll be ready. This time we'll have witnesses everywhere. Guards, nobles, common wolves. Everyone will see what happens when these predators are cornered. It's going to get ugly. It already is ugly. We're just going to make sure everyone sees it. Kaelin leaned against him, thinking, "What do you need from me?" "I need you visible, present. A reminder of what they tried to destroy and failed." His hand found hers, fingers interlacing. "Can you do that?" "Yes." "Even knowing they'll try again to silence you?" "Especially knowing that." She looked up at him. "Because every time they try and fail, we win a little more." He kissed her then, soft and fierce, and full of everything words couldn't express. The arrests happened at dawn, coordinated across 5 territories simultaneously. Lord Brennan was taken from his estate in chains, his protests echoing across the courtyard as guards loaded evidence into carriages. He raged about injustice, about persecution, about the king's madness. But when the guard showed him the warrant, signed by Alaric and witnessed by council head Silas, he went quiet. Lady Cassia tried to run. She made it to the border before guards caught her, dragging her from a merchant wagon where she'd been hiding among grain sacks. Her capture was witnessed by dozens of travelers, and the story spread like wildfire. Marcus Thorne, no relation to Kaelin, surrendered peacefully, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. As guards led him away, he looked directly at the messenger who'd delivered his warrant and said clearly, "This is not over. Tell the king, this is not over." The 3 other council members reacted with varying degrees of shock and fury, but all were arrested without violence. By midday, the news had spread across every territory. By evening, the realm was in chaos. Protests erupted in 3 major cities. Families allied with the arrested wolves demanded their release, claiming persecution and injustice. Merchants who'd profited from the trafficking networks closed their shops in solidarity, and a delegation of 20 alphas descended on the castle, demanding an audience with the king. Alaric received them in the great hall, with Kaelin standing beside his throne, not behind it, beside it. The symbolism was deliberate and impossible to miss. She wore a dress of deep crimson, the color of royalty, of power, of blood. Her shoulder was bandaged beneath the fabric, but she stood straight and strong, meeting the eyes of every alpha who entered. The lead alpha, a massive man named Garrett Stone from the Western Territories, stepped forward, his expression thunderous. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice dripping with barely controlled fury, "you have arrested some of the most respected wolves in the realm, destroyed families, seized assets, all based on the word of Omegas, and this—" He gestured dismissively at Kaelin. "This commoner you've elevated above her station." "Mind your tongue, Stone," Alaric's voice was deadly quiet. "That commoner is my mate and your future queen. Show respect or leave." "Respect?" Garrett laughed harshly. "You want us to respect an Omega who's torn apart the social order? Who's convinced you to destroy everything our ancestors built?" "Our ancestors," Kaelin said quietly, "built a system on slavery and suffering. Maybe it deserves to be destroyed." Every alpha in the room turned to stare at her. Some looked shocked that she'd dare speak. Others looked furious. A few, a very few, looked thoughtful. Garrett's face flushed red. "You dare speak in the presence of—" "I dare." Kaelin stood, moving to stand beside Alaric rather than behind him. The movement was deliberate, symbolic. "I dare because I was one of the wolves your system destroyed, because my father was murdered to protect your profits, because I was chained with silver for refusing to submit." Her voice strengthened. "And I dare because I'm not the only one. There are hundreds of us, thousands. Omegas who've suffered in silence because speaking up meant death." "You're exaggerating." "Am I?" Kaelin gestured to the side door. "Guards, bring in the evidence." The doors opened and guards wheeled in cart after cart of documents, ledgers, and sealed testimonies. The sheer volume was staggering. 12 years of records stacked high enough to reach Kaelin's shoulders. "This," Kaelin said, her voice carrying across the silent hall, is 12 years of records, sales receipts, transfer documents, correspondence between the wolves you're defending, every Omega bought, sold, or disappeared, every crime committed and covered up, every life destroyed for profit. She looked Garrett dead in the eye. Still think I'm exaggerating? One of the other alphas, a younger man with scars across his face and a haunted look in his eyes, stepped forward to examine the documents. His hands shook as he picked up a ledger, scanning the entries. His expression changed as he read, horror replacing anger. "Stars above," he whispered. "This is real. All of it." "Of course it's real," another alpha snapped, an older woman with gray hair and cold eyes. "But it's also private business. What wolves do with their property." "Omegas are not property." Kalen's voice cracked like a whip across the hall. "We're wolves. We're people. We have names and families and dreams and the right to live without fear. We deserve the same protections, the same choices, the same basic dignity as any alpha standing in this room. The hierarchy exists for a reason. The hierarchy exists to protect predators like you." She was shouting now, months of suppressed rage finally breaking free. The bandage on her shoulder pulled tight, but she ignored it. "It exists so you can abuse power without consequences. So you can hurt people weaker than you and call it tradition. So you can buy and sell living beings and pretend it's business." Tears streamed down her face, but her voice never wavered. "Well, I'm done pretending. I'm done being silent. I'm done accepting that some wolves matter more than others just because they were born stronger. And if that destroys your precious social order, then good. Let it burn. Build a better one from the ashes." The hall was absolutely silent. Even Garrett seemed momentarily speechless, his mouth hanging open. Then the young, scarred alpha spoke. His voice was quiet, but carried clearly in the stillness. "She's right." Garrett whirled on him. "Marcus, don't be a fool. I said she's right." Marcus's voice was firmer now, stronger. He turned to Alaric. "Your Majesty, I came here angry, ready to demand you release the prisoners and restore order. But after seeing this," he gestured to the mountains of evidence. "After hearing her speak, I can't. I won't. If this is what our order was built on, then it deserves to burn." "You're a traitor to your own kind," Garrett hissed. "No, I'm finally being loyal to what our realm should be, not what it's become." Marcus looked around at the other alphas. "We can fight this. We can defend the old ways and pretend none of this matters. Or we can admit we were wrong and build something better. The choice is ours." Slowly, other alphas began to nod. Not all of them. Garrett and 5 others looked mutinous, furious, unmoved. But enough nodded. Enough looked at the evidence with dawning horror. Enough glanced at Kalen with something that might have been respect. Garrett realized he was losing control of the delegation. His face twisted with rage and something else, fear, maybe, of what was coming. "This isn't over," he snarled at Alaric. "You think you've won. You've started a war. And when the dust settles, when your pretty Omega is dead and your throne is in ruins, you'll have nothing left but regret and ash." The threat hung in the air like poison. Alaric stood slowly and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. His wolf rose to the surface, making his eyes glow gold and his presence expand until it filled the entire hall. "If you threaten my mate again," he said softly, each word precisely enunciated, "I will consider it an act of war, and I will respond accordingly." Garrett's wolf responded instinctively, backing down from the Alpha King's dominance, but his eyes remained defiant. "Mark my words, Stormbane, this ends badly for you." He stormed out, taking 6 alphas with him, but 14 stayed. Marcus approached the throne, dropping to one knee. "Your Majesty, Miss Thorne, you have my support, my territory's support, my pack's support. Whatever you need to see this through, you have it." One by one, the other alphas followed suit. Not all of them knelt. Some simply bowed, others voiced their support standing. But the gesture was clear. The tide was turning. When the last had pledged their support, Alaric stood. "Then here's what we need," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Help spreading the truth across your territories. Help protecting the survivors and any Omega who comes forward with testimony. Help rebuilding a realm where power doesn't give you the right to destroy lives." He paused. "This isn't about Omegas versus Alphas. This isn't about tearing down the strong to lift up the weak. This is about justice versus cruelty, about protecting those who can't protect themselves, And I need wolves who understand that difference. You have us, Marcus said simply. What do you need us to do? The trials began 2 weeks later, after investigators had gathered every piece of evidence they could find and prepared the most airtight cases possible. They were public, broadcast across the territories through a network of messengers and scribes so that everyone could hear the testimony, see the evidence, watch justice unfold in real time. The council chamber was packed for the first trial. Every seat filled, people standing in the aisles, guards stationed at every exit. Kaelin sat in a place of honor beside Alaric's throne, visible to everyone. Lord Brennan went first. He entered in chains, his usual arrogance still intact. "This is a farce," he announced loudly. "A persecution of the nobility by a king who's lost his mind over an Omega whore." The crowd gasped. Alaric's hand clenched on his throne's armrest, but he remained silent. Kaelin stood. "I am not a whore," she said clearly. "I am a survivor. And so are the women who will testify against you today." Brennan sneered. "Let them try. The word of Omegas means nothing." "Then let's test that," the prosecuting attorney said. "Call the first witness." Elena took the stand. She was thin, scarred, terrified. Her hands shook as she swore to tell the truth. But when she began to speak, her voice was steady. She told her story. Told about being purchased at 16 from a family desperate enough to sell their daughter. Told about 7 years of captivity in Brennan's estate. Told about the other Omegas she'd watched suffer and die. Told about the day Alaric's guards had finally broken down the door and freed her. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her face, and Brennan's arrogance had cracked. "She's lying," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She's been coached." "Show him the medical records," the prosecutor said. They showed scars consistent with prolonged abuse. Malnutrition. Evidence of repeated trauma. The court physician testified to injuries that matched Elena's testimony exactly. "Show him the ledger." They showed Brennan's own handwriting, recording the purchase of one Omega female age 16 for a sum that made the crowd gasp. "Call the second witness." Another survivor took the stand. Then another. Then another. By the fourth testimony, Brennan had stopped protesting. He sat in his chair, face pale, as his crimes were laid bare for the entire realm to see. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. The sentence, life imprisonment, all assets seized and distributed to his victims. When the gavel fell, Kaelin felt something release in her chest. One down, more to go. Lady Cassia's trial was different. She came in crying, begging for mercy, claiming she'd been misled by her late husband, that she'd never meant to hurt anyone, that she was a victim too. But the evidence was undeniable. 7 Omegas purchased over 15 years, 2 confirmed dead, the others bearing scars and trauma that would last a lifetime. Her tears didn't save her. Guilty. Marcus Thorne tried a different approach. Defiance. He stood before the court and declared that he'd done nothing wrong, that Omegas existed to serve, that the entire trial was an attack on tradition itself. The crowd didn't agree. When his victims testified, 3 Omegas he'd kept as servants, who described years of abuse, the crowd's anger was palpable. Guilty. One by one, the accused faced justice. Some accepted their verdicts with dignity, others raged and threatened, but none escaped the consequences. And through it all, Kaelin sat in the courtroom, visible and present, a living reminder of what they'd tried to destroy and failed. On the final day of trials, after the last verdict had been read and the last criminal led away in chains, Silas Blackwood stood to address the court. "This council," he said, his ancient voice carrying across the silent chamber, "has witnessed something unprecedented. We have seen the darkness that festered beneath our social order. We have heard the testimony of those we failed to protect, and we have delivered justice. Imperfect, incomplete, but justice nonetheless." He turned to Alaric. "Your Majesty, you have shaken this realm to its foundations. Some will never forgive you for it. But you have also saved lives, changed lives, given hope to wolves who had none. That matters more than any political alliance or noble bloodline." Then he turned to Kaelin. "And you, Miss Thorne, you who have suffered more than most and yet refuse to be silenced. You have taught this realm something we desperately needed to learn. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear silence you. Tears streamed down Kaylin's face. The trials are over, Silas continued, but the work has just begun. New laws must be written, new protections established, a new order built from the ruins of the old. He looked around the chamber. It will take time. It will face opposition, but it will happen. Because we have seen the truth, and we cannot unsee it. The chamber erupted into applause. Not everyone. Some sat in stony silence, their faces hard with resentment. But enough. More than enough. That evening, Alaric found Kaylin in the garden, standing beneath bare branches and watching the first stars appear in the twilight sky. "It's done," she said quietly as he approached. "The trials are done," he corrected, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "The real work is just beginning." "I know." She leaned back against him. "New laws, new systems, years of fighting and rebuilding. Are you ready for that?" "I don't know. I'm exhausted. I hurt everywhere. And I'm terrified of what comes next." She turned in his arms to face him. "But I'm also hopeful. For the first time in my life, I actually believe things can change." "They already have changed. You changed them." "We changed them," she corrected. He smiled. "We changed them. Together." His expression turned serious. "Which brings me to something I've been wanting to ask you." Something in his tone made her heart skip. "What?" Alaric dropped to one knee in the snow that had begun to fall. Kaylin's breath caught. "Kaylin Thorne," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "You are the strongest, bravest, most infuriating person I've ever met. You challenged me when everyone else feared me. You changed me when I thought I was beyond changing. You stood beside me when it would have been safer to run." He opened the box, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, with a stone that caught the starlight. "You chose me, not because of the mate bond, but despite every reason not to. Will you continue choosing me? Will you marry me? Will you be my queen, my partner, my equal in all things?" Kaylin was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course, yes. Always yes." Alaric slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that tasted like snow and promises and forever. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kaylin laughed through her tears. "The council's going to hate this. Half the council is in prison. The other half knows better than to argue with me now." Alaric grinned. "Besides, I'm the Alpha King. I can marry whoever I want." "Fair point." She looked down at the ring on her finger, watching it sparkle. "Whenever you want. Tomorrow. Next month. Next year." "Spring," Kaylin decided. "When everything's being reborn, when the mountains are alive again. Spring it is." They stood together in the falling snow, holding each other close, while the castle lights glowed warm behind them and the future stretched out before them, uncertain, challenging, but theirs to build together. The wedding took place 3 months later on the first day of spring, when the mountains were alive with new growth and the territories were still healing from the revelations that had shaken them to their foundations. Kaylin wore a dress the color of dawn, not the traditional white that symbolized purity, but something that reflected who she was. Different, unconventional, unapologetic. The fabric was embroidered with silver thread in patterns of breaking chains, a reminder of where she'd come from and what she'd overcome. Her hair was braided with winter roses and mountain laurel. She wore no jewelry except the ring Alaric had given her and a simple necklace her mother had left her, the only thing of value her family had ever owned. The ceremony was held outside, in front of the castle, so that everyone could attend. Not just nobles and alphas, but everyone, omegas, betas, common wolves from every territory who traveled to witness this impossible thing, an omega becoming queen. Thousands gathered. They filled the castle grounds, spilled into the surrounding meadows, climbed trees for a better view. And when Kaylin emerged from the castle, a collective gasp went up from the crowd. She walked alone down the aisle. No one to give her away, because she was giving herself. Elena and the other survivors stood as her witnesses, tears streaming down their faces. Mira sat in the front row, beaming with pride. And at the end of the aisle stood Alaric, looking at her like she was the only person in existence. When Kaylin reached him and took his hands, she felt the mate bond pulse between them. warm, steady, eternal. But stronger than the bond was the choice, the conscious decision they'd both made to stand here together. The officiant began the ceremony, speaking of bonds and fate and destiny. But when it came time for vows, Alaric and Kaelin had written their own. I was taught that strength meant dominance, Alaric said, his voice carrying across the crowd. That being Alpha King meant being above everyone else, untouchable and alone. But you taught me something different. You taught me that real strength is choosing compassion when cruelty would be easier. That real power is using it to protect, not to harm. That being king means serving those who need you most, not ruling those beneath you. His hands tightened on hers. You made me better. You made me whole. And I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. To stand beside you, not above you. To build the kind of realm where no one has to suffer the way you did. Where power means responsibility, not privilege. Where everyone, Omega, Beta, Alpha, has the freedom to choose their own path. Kaelin's throat was tight with emotion, but she managed to speak. I was taught that being Omega meant being less, she said, her voice clear despite the tears streaming down her face. Being weak, being powerless, being property. But I'm none of those things, and neither is any Omega standing here today. She looked out at the crowd, at the hundreds of Omegas who'd come to witness this moment. I promise to remember that. To use whatever power I have to protect those who can't protect themselves. To speak for those who can't speak. To build a realm where no one has to choose between survival and dignity. She looked back at Alaric, her heart so full it hurt. And I promise to love you, not because fate chose you, not because the mate bond demands it, but because I choose you, every day, every moment, for the rest of our lives. You stood beside me when I had nothing. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. You gave me the greatest gift anyone ever has. You gave me choices, and I choose you, always. When the officiant pronounced them bonded, the crowd erupted into cheers so loud they echoed off the mountains. Alaric pulled Kaelin close and kissed her, deep and claiming and full of joy and promise and love. And in that moment, standing before thousands of wolves who'd witnessed her journey from chains to crown, Kaelin felt something she'd never felt before. Complete. Not because she had a mate or a title or power, but because she'd fought for herself and won. Because she'd refused to accept that the world couldn't change and changed it anyway. Because she was finally, completely, irrevocably free. The celebration lasted 3 days and 3 nights. There was music and dancing and food enough to feed every territory. Wolves from across the realm came to pay their respects. And while some still looked at Kaelin with doubt or resentment, most saw something else in her, hope. On the final night, as the festivities wound down and guests began departing, Kaelin stood on the castle balcony, overlooking the realm spread out beneath her. The mountains were dark silhouettes against a sky full of stars, and in the valleys below, she could see the lights of 100 villages. Alaric joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That it's not finished," she said quietly. "The trials are over, the conspirators are imprisoned, but there's still so much work to do. Laws to change, attitudes to shift, systems to rebuild, generations of hurt to heal." "I know. Are you scared?" "Terrified." He kissed her temple. "But I'm also hopeful. Because if we can change this much in 3 months, imagine what we can do in 3 years, or 30. Kaelin smiled. "We're going to make a lot of wolves angry." "Probably. Change always does. We're going to face opposition at every turn." "Definitely, but we'll face it together. It's going to be hard, really hard." "Without question." He turned her to face him. "But it's also going to be worth it, because 50 years from now, Omegas won't have to fight for basic rights. They'll have them. Young wolves will grow up in a realm where power doesn't excuse cruelty, where strength means protecting, not dominating, where everyone has choices, not just the strong." His hand cupped her face. "And it'll be because you refused to stay silent, because you chose to fight when silence would have been safer." Kaelin felt tears prick her eyes. "Because we refused to stay silent. This was never just me, Alaric. It was you, the survivors, Mira, every wolf who chose justice over tradition." "But you were the spark," he said softly, "the one who started the fire." They kissed as the last of the celebration fireworks painted the sky in gold and silver, brilliant flashes that lit up the entire realm. Somewhere in those distant villages, a young Omega girl saw those fireworks and heard the story of Kaelin Thorne, the Omega who'd been chained in a stable and rose to become queen, who'd stood up to predators and won, who'd changed everything just by refusing to accept that things couldn't change. And that girl thought, maybe I can too. Kaelin didn't know about that girl yet. Didn't know about the hundreds like her across the territories, watching and learning and finding courage in her story. But she would, because her story wasn't just about one Omega escaping chains, it was about breaking them for everyone. Years later, when scholars studied this period, and they would study it endlessly, they'd call it the Great Reformation. They'd write thick books about the trials, the new laws, the systematic dismantling of the trafficking networks. They'd debate whether the change had been too fast or too slow, too radical or not radical enough. But those who lived through it called it something simpler, the moment everything changed. And it started with a girl in chains who refused to break, who chose love over fear, who chose justice over safety, who proved that the strongest wolves weren't the ones who dominated, they were the ones who protected, who stood when everyone told them to kneel, who changed the world by simply refusing to accept that the world couldn't change. Kaelin Thorne had been many things in her life: daughter, sister, servant, prisoner, survivor, fighter. Now she was queen. But more importantly, she was free. And she spent the rest of her life, every day, every decision, every law she helped pass, and every Omega she helped protect, making sure everyone else could be free too. The girl who'd sat in chains while the world celebrated around her had become the woman who changed that world forever. And she did it not through destiny or fate or the mate bond. She did it through choice. Every single day she chose courage over fear. She chose to speak over staying silent. She chose to fight over accepting defeat. And in the end, that made all the difference.